Greetings, everyone. Welcome to another day of World Unity Week. And this has been remarkable, what momentum that we're building here. And I'm really thrilled about today's session because today we're going to be exploring how cooperation becomes more than a value. How does it become a practice, a set of skills, a science, and a way for teams and teams of teams to serve life more effectively? One of the ways to play in the compassion games is to play together for a shared impact. And I've already learned so much and just been brought to the humble state of realizing how challenging it really is to play together. And today, what I love about this and the partnership that has emerged with ProSocial World, and I've known Jeff and I've known David Sloan Wilson through the ELs for years now. And we did actually, Ben and I and the whole team did a course on ProSocial a number of years ago when it first kind of came part of the world. And more than ever, we've seen how essential this is, that the evolution here of a practical toolkit for helping groups live and work better together is coming together with that science into usable tools, the training, the facilitation, and the group development that's needed. While the compassion games is a real world arena where teams and teams of teams can practice cooperation, we need this togetherness here to learn how we do this. And there is the wisdom and genius that we're going to share today through ProSocial World. So I'm going to introduce first Jeff Genung, and I'm going to read here from a bio that you should know about Jeff. But there's a lot more to Jeff than these words I'm about to say. But he's the managing director and the chief architect of ProSocial World. He's a social entrepreneur, technology leader, and contemplative practitioner whose work brings together science, spirituality, technology, and transformative practice. Jeff previously co-founded Contemplative Life, a nonprofit digital hub connecting people and communities with transformative practices, and Transformation 365, an experiential practice network. Through ProSocial World, he helps make the science and practice of cooperation accessible to groups, communities, and change agents working for a world that works for all. So it gives me great pleasure to introduce you, Jeff Genung. Welcome.
Thank you. It's really great to be here and to be, having a conversation with you about the compassion games and about how we can work together to improve cooperation towards transformative action. Also want to thank and acknowledge Ben Bowler and Unity Earth and congratulate Unity Earth on its 10th anniversary and World Unity Week, which I've been a part of for many years. And also Hubcast Media for giving us the opportunity to kind of broadcast this to many hearts and minds all over the world. So thank you all, and thank you so much for participating in this. It's really good to be here.
Beautiful, Jeff. And as we are about to begin, when we were preparing, you suggested one of the practices. You said, hey, why don't we take a couple of minutes? And we've learned too that, ceremony as strategy, and sometimes just a pause can make a huge difference in the experience we're having as a group. So you suggested, I agreed, let's do it. Let's actually, so you have a clip, as I understand,
do.
right?
At the 7th anniversary of Contemplative Life, this digital hub that connects people and communities with transformative practices, it happened right around the time of the pandemic, where we stopped meeting in person, but we were meeting virtually. And so I had this inspiration to put together a short video clip of 3 minutes of silence. We found that it transformed interactions, particularly virtual interactions. And it is the equivalent of like cleansing the palate when you're tasting something, but it prepares us to enter greater depth and relationship with whoever we're going to be in with next. And so I've got a 3-minute short video clip. Begins with a bell, and then there's a flickering candle inviting people coming in into silence, and then it ends with a bell. And often call it a word from our sponsor. So I invite you
Love that.
into this 3-minute clip of silence and prayer and intention. And I will see you on the other side.
Mm. Mm. Wow.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Jeff. Jeff, I thought a good place to start is to tell us how your collaboration with David began.
Yeah,
And,
that's a good place to start. So my colleague and co-founder, David Sloan Wilson, will be joining us shortly. And my journey with ProSocial and my journey with David happened by an introduction of somebody that many of us know, Kurt Johnson. Kurt is also an evolutionary biologist, scientist, and a contemplative and a friend of Wayne Teasdale's. And that's how I met Kurt. And he also has this close relationship with another scientist, David Sloan Wilson, who's an evolutionary scientist and author. And David had founded a nonprofit organization called the Evolution Institute. And in the Evolution Institute, he created two initiatives. One was called ProSocial. The other one was called This View of Life. And it was gaining an interest and popularity, but it wasn't an organization. It was an initiative inside another organization. And so Kurt introduced him to me to see, maybe Contemplative Life could sponsor ProSocial in its platform, a digital hub. And we had really two requirements. One, it had to be a transformative practice. And secondly, a community of practice, one or either. So when I learned, introduced to David and learned about ProSocial, it was both. It was both a very profound practice, but also a community of practice. And so that's how we began our journey together. But the other thing that happened is that as I began to learn about what ProSocial was, the lights went off and I realized,
Mm,
oh my God, this is what everybody's been waiting for. A repeatable, evidence-based framework that facilitates cooperation at scale and flourishing at any level, small, medium, large, global. And so I realize is that this is really profound, something that the world needs to know about. And began,
mm.
kind of working with the core group that then we ended up spinning those two initiatives off the Evolution Institute. We formed ProSocial World as a 501(c)(3) nonprofit.
Mm. All right. So then I'm curious, what does spirituality contribute to cooperation? I mean, because what's fascinating to me, Jeff, is that you've got the intersection of science, spirituality, arts, and technology. I know that's core to you, and how the service of compassion and cooperative world is so important. How do these streams come together in pro-social? I mean, how does spirituality contribute to our capacity to cooperate and cooperation?
Well, that is a very good question. Thank you for asking it. So, and that's what drew me into ProSocial World because, I co-founded Contemplative Life. I had a gig. It was fully
Right,
occupied.
right.
Um, but I saw the ProSocial framework is composed of three different sciences. It's the work of Elinor Ostrom, the Nobel laureate, the only woman to ever win the Nobel Prize in economics, modern evolutionary science, which is the science of cooperation, and the other science is contextual behavioral science, which really teaches methods for psychological flexibility and adaptation, which is
Mm,
really important if you want to consciously
right.
evolve. You have to be able to change,
Mm,
which is hard. Um, and so I looked at that and kind of thought about pro-social as what you might call the horizontal dimension of social cultural flourishing, which is very complete, but it's incomplete in as much as it doesn't go deep enough into the self-transformation and transcendence, which I would refer to as the vertical dimension. Um,
uh,
and so the exploration is how do we bring these two together, this horizontal and vertical dimension? And there is a component of the three scientific frameworks, which is the contextual behavioral science framework that goes into mindfulness practices, and it has a practice base, inner work, self-reflection. And so, it goes to some depth, but doesn't go deep enough. So one of the things that we've been exploring in the last 4 years is bringing contemplative frameworks and interspiritual frameworks into the pro-social framework to see how they play together. And it
mm.
turns out they play really well together. They add to each other in very significant ways.
Beautiful. Good news for all of us as we're kind of upgrading our intelligence here on planet Earth and to have this guiding wisdom. You know, we've seen that too from the indigenous world. that so many of the similar practices, that there's that Patricia calls intrapersonal holiness for interpersonal wholeness. And that
Beautiful.
inner world and outer world. I know in the ProSocial Essentials course, which is why I'm thrilled that we're going to be able to tell people that they're participating in the compassion games. They're going to have access to ProSocial Essentials as a gift from ProSocial World, and we're really grateful for that. And I mean, if you listen to what Jeff's saying, we're talking about really making the change happen. That there's a framework, and maybe with a little bit of silence and a little bit of pause and a little bit of humility, we're going to be able to actually make the changes we need to make. Fabulous, fabulous, fabulous. Well, I wanted to ask you something else about this. Um, what role can technology play in helping cooperation become visible, measurable, and shareable? You know, without reducing it to numbers alone, where do you see the technology fitting here?
Well, we're in one of those quantum leaps again in technology. I've been in technology for many years, earlier in my career, um, both in hardware and in mobile software development. And I was in mobile software development at the very origin of mobile. And what happened in the last technology cycle is three transformative technologies came together in a very short period of time. And when they came together, it resulted in a quantum leap in technology. Those three technologies were first cloud computing, going from a central storage to a cloud storage. And once cloud computing was available, mobile could be born. You couldn't do
Mm,
mobile without cloud, but with cloud you could. And so then this other transformative technology was born. And then right around the same time, the third one, which is social. So
mm,
social, cloud, and mobile came together at one time, and they happened so quickly that it created a leapfrog in technology and even broke through some barriers too. So for instance, if you think 15 years ago, social, anything social was not welcome in business and organization. But what happened is that they had to open the doors to that because it was coming in through the back door. So they had to open up the front door as well. So we're now in another phase, another quantum leap. And I see also three technologies at play here. We hear about AIs. AI is a big one, but AI, a kite needs a tail and a string. And so blockchain can actually help with that because it can help to authenticate what is real and what is not
mm,
real. Um, and with those two, those are good and they'll do transformative things, but there's a third one. And the third one is XR. It's virtual reality, augmented reality, 3D, and many other things that is going to open possibilities of interaction and experience that we couldn't even have dreamed of before. So those three will come together, I really
mm,
believe, and it's going to transform, it's going to change so many things. But here's the thing, and this gets to your point, is that technology, it's kind of like, money and resources. It doesn't make a person good or bad, happy or sad. It just magnifies what they already are. Um,
mm,
the thing with technology is it has possibilities, but it has to be designed and engineered to take you where you want to go for experiences and applications that can really move the needle in terms of consciousness and compassion and trust and that sort of thing. So part of the challenge that we have here is the creative geniuses that have the skills and that are doing the work, the coding with design and engineering and architecture, often very young, um, and may or may not have done much inner work. On the other side of it, you have, contemplatives, those that have done a great deal of inner work, but they don't keep pace with technology. And so in a sense, what is really needed is we need to bring those together. those that have the experience of what to design and build in order to move to this future that we want, and those that have the capacity to design and engineer those solutions. So the possibility is there, but we need to connect the dots in order to have the transformation that we all want.
Mm. Mm. Well, you could see us struggling as a civilization to put in place the cooperation necessary to take these technologies and make sure that they're applied just for the good. That we know that the competitive forces and the interests are so great that the best of them are honestly saying we know that we're not always acting in our best interest, that they can't get off. It's the Moloch trap, that the competitive nature and the need for financial gain is so strong. And we're at that kind of existential moment where the capabilities we're being told can far outstrip anything we've ever seen before. When Claude starts writing Claude 9 and Claude 9 writes Claude 10, you talk about coding. Who's coding anymore? We're really in a new space of possibilities. And I want to talk more about that, but I also want to talk about the arts and where the arts come in. And how these stories, how the story and beauty and ritual and music and imagination help groups become more pro-social.
Well, the arts are critically important to this. So let me just take a minute and provide some framing to what I'm saying, four streams coming together that open up a portal of quantum possibility. Science, spirituality, the arts and technology, but not just, science as a whole, or spirituality or the arts, but the leading edges of these. And I'll connect the dots in a minute. So you take the leading edges of the new sciences, quantum physics and neuroscience and contemplative science, kind of the new kid on the block. And what the trend line, what do they share in common? And there's many others that are like that right at the edge. And then you take spirituality, because spirituality is evolving just like anything else. So take things like, interspirituality, which is an experiential spirituality, contemplative spirituality, interbeing, Thich Nhat Hanh's famous vision, intergoal, Sri Aurobindo's, and others that are kind of at the leading edge of where that's going. And then the transformative arts, because each of these are portals or windows into the mystery. And the reason the four of them are important is because we're all wired differently, and we're all going to come probably through one or another portal. So it's a big tent if you have all of them
Yes.
kind of working together. And then, of course, what we're seeing with technology that is transforming all kinds of things. One of the things that all of them have in common is profound interconnectedness. That's what they're all pointing to, profound interconnectedness, which is the
Yeah.
North Star. And
Yeah.
when we begin to recognize that, live from that, and begin to work together toward that, things can happen very quickly on the positive side. And they need to happen very quickly. But the hopeful
Yes.
thing is that they can.
Yeah.
So the
Yeah.
transformative arts are a very important piece of it. And it's, said, and I think that we can all acknowledge that there's something about the arts and music that are out ahead of language and words. They vibrate certain things in us, and they reveal certain things, certain experiences that words are much slower to get to and sometimes can't get to it. So the arts can, I would refer it to stepping on an escalator of grace. Every step you take, something takes a step or two for you.
Beautiful, beautiful. Well, you know, the whole theme of the Compassion Games and of World Unity Week is a new beginning. And when we talk about the arts and we talk about this leap that I think we're at the moment of, it's really the end of an old story. And it is the story of separation. Like you just said, everything is so interconnected, maybe a lot more than we even understand. And it's through the arts that we feel that shared felt experience, that, empathy. We just saw, Summer and I saw Disclosure Day. And that is our superpower, to really see each other and serve each other and uplift each other and use that interconnection to be the beginning of a new beginning, that we begin again and we begin together. That's why the partnership with ProSocial is so important to me. And I'm curious to hear from you, Jeff. What excites you about bringing the ProSocial into the Compassion Games?
Well, first of all, I want to acknowledge the Compassion Games and the vision behind the Compassion Games. I think David referred to you one time as a genius practitioner. Well said. A genius practitioner. He doesn't offer comments like that very often. And I think it is genius. Having a competition to see who can be the most compassionate, co-opetition, as you coined the word. Beautiful, just beautiful. And that's kind of what we need more of. We need models for it. And the work that you and others have been doing in the Compassion Games over the last decade or more is a glimpse of the future. It's profoundly important. But one of the things that we have discovered in our work, the work of ProSocial, is it's not enough to want to cooperate. That's important. But you have to have the means to cooperate, the skills to cooperate.
Yeah.
That's equally important because that's how you can do it more quickly. You don't have to reinvent the wheel, but it's also how you can bring the cooperation at scale. So when you bring cooperation and skill building capacity to the Compassion Games and to cooperative efforts, there's a way of getting a flywheel turning where you can kind of do more and kind of create a vortex of interest and possibility. So we're very excited about it because essentially, it's the work at hand. This is the means. That's the end. Is what do you do with these tools to cooperate? Well, if you can do things that lighten the suffering and the burden of others, well, beautiful. That's it. That's the work.
Yeah, yeah. There's such a good fit, Jeff. I mean, the Compassion Games offer this field of play. Well, we all want to get better at playing on the field. And there's this profound work that's been done offering up best practices for how teams can more effectively cooperate with each other. And the science is there. That was what's so fabulous when I learned about multi-level selection. Because the co-opetition thing, I want people to know where that came from because it was an observation that was like life-changing in one way for me. Because I'd been a community organizer for whatever reason. I was on the streets of Seattle talking to people about the problems, and people would always say to me, "Oh, I'm so glad you're doing that. Keep up the good work." But when I told people that the mayor of Louisville had claimed that they were the most compassionate city and would be so till proven otherwise, it was amazing. People would say, "Oh my God, really? How can I get involved?" There's something in our behavior and nature that we belong to a place. And when somehow it was being threatened, or somehow the idea of bringing a competitive energy into doing good in the world struck me as a culture hack. I said, oh my God, this is survival of the kindest. And that has become and continues to be a fun reframe. There's a new way to win. And maybe the way to win is by helping everyone else win. And we all win together.
Yeah.
So playing together, and then you guys offer really the practices on how we cope with some of the challenges we face about how do we turn self-interest into shared interest, how are we going to protect the space, how do we keep the integrity, how do we keep the transparency, how do we build the trust. I mean, we're offering all of that through this partnership, and I'm thrilled that we can. So if you're listening to this, I want you to not only play in the compassion games, but I want you to take advantage of the opportunity to learn about pro-social and this course on pro-social essentials that you guys are gifting all the players of the games with, and form the teams and the teams of teams and see how these nested relationships, how we're all in the bioregions we are in, because compassion always has to happen in a place. So together is one of the doors, earth is another one, people is another one, and place. We see those as the four pathways onto the playing field. You can come in through any of those doors, and being pro-social in the process only is going to strengthen your capacity to play and play together.
Yeah, it may be helpful to share a little context of, how ProSocial itself came together, not the organization, but the scientific frameworks. And I'll just take a few minutes, and I see David is going to be joining us here as well, my colleague and co-founder. But Elinor Ostrom, who won the Nobel Prize in economics, was a researcher. She wasn't an economist. And her and her husband researched groups and communities all over the world. And the thing that they were most interested in is how certain groups and communities were able to avoid something called the tragedy of the commons. And the tragedy of the commons, in short, is this, is that whenever you have a common pool resource, water, land, anything like that, and you have ungoverned competition for that resource, because of greed and selfishness, it takes the resource, thus the tragedy. But what she discovered and ultimately won the Nobel Prize for is that groups and communities avoided that tragedy in very similar ways, and they didn't compare notes. And so what she discovered is something that is part of the essence of the human experience historically. We are exceptionally good at cooperating, but we've lost our way. We've forgotten how to do this in this world of hyper individualism and hyper competitiveness. And so what happened is that my colleague David, who's an evolutionary scientist and is well known for multi-level selection theory, dual inheritance theory, basically taking Darwinian evolutionary theory and applying it to culture and social transformation. Same principles apply, it turns out. Well, he came upon Elinor's writings and he realized, oh my God, this is evolutionary. And so they began collaborating. And then a short time later, she won the Nobel Prize. And then what happened is another scientist, Stephen Hayes, from another field of study, the contextual behavioral science, looked at what was going on with David and Elinor and what was being written there and said, this completely fits with what we're doing. And it adds to what you need to do to take a theory and actually put it into practice. And that's how these three different scientific frameworks came together. And what ProSocial has done is taken these three frameworks and put them into a methodology that can be shared, it can be taught, it can be learned, it can be researched, so that you can provide feedback, so that there's a continuous mechanism for improvement, and a mechanism to see how groups and communities score on what Elinor Ostrom defined as the 8 core design principles.
Mm,
of cooperation or pro-social behavior. And I'll end with this last piece, that the first core design principle is the most important. And sometimes it's the hardest, but it's the most important. And what it is any group, any organization, network that really wants to align in a highly cooperative, collaborative way has to align on a shared identity and purpose, a
mm,
shared identity and purpose, because that's their North Star. And if they do that work to identify what that is, you can hook the other core design principles up to that. And
mm.
so we've trained over 1,000, well, I think upwards of 2,000 facilitators in 50 countries. And we've recently created a 2-hour self-paced introduction that we call ProSocial Essentials. And this is it's hot off the press too. This is kind of brand new. And what we want to do is gift it to the Compassion Games. We want to
Mm.
give you this essentially these tools, this toolkit to be able to put on and then take out into the work that you're doing in the world to help you do it quicker and better. So
Wow. Wow.
little kind of Reader's Digest version of some of the history and then what we want to give to the Compassion Games.
Mm. God, we are so grateful. We are so grateful. The idea that, Jeff, that we can actually get good at this and get better at this. I mean, what the potential that you're offering there is so beautiful and good, beautiful and true. Welcome, David. Welcome. Hey, let me take 2 minutes to introduce you properly here, okay? We're so thrilled you're here. Jeff has done such a great job of building the bridges between the science of cooperation, the practice of cooperation, and how it applies in the games. But David Sloan Wilson, the one and only, is president of ProSocial World and SUNY State University, New York, distinguished professor emeritus of biology and anthropology at Binghamton University. A leading evolutionary biologist and author, David has spent his career applying evolutionary science to human behavior, cooperation, culture, and social change. Through his research, writing, and work with ProSocial World, he helps groups use the principles of evolution to strengthen cooperation, build shared purpose, and create lasting positive change. And David, you've spent so much of your life asking how evolution can help us understand cooperation. What's the essential insight that people need to understand about pro-social behavior?
Well, in the
And
first
welcome.
place, thank you, John, and sorry to be late. I just love hearing it coming from you and Jeff. So part of me wants to say to carry on. You do a great job of explaining it yourself. I'm not needed.
Oh, no.
And but I think that there's something about working in small groups. It's the natural human social environment. Jeff talked about individualism, and the 20th century was an age of individualism and reductionism, as if the basic unit was the standalone individual, the Homo economicus of economic theory. But now we can say with great authority that uh, individuals never lived alone through our
Mm,
entire history as a species. We always lived in the context of small, meaningful, and appropriately structured group. That's the natural human social environment. That's where we thrive as individuals. And I want to stress that we don't lose our agency as individuals when we become part of small cooperative groups. Quite the contrary, our agency is enhanced. And these
mm,
groups require, part of these core design principles it requires the participation of all of its members. They're like miniature democracies. And it's an affirmation of the principle of democracy. These are the most democratic and highly regulated in a good sense groups. Are these small, meaningful, that's CDP1 that Jeff was mentioning, and appropriately structured, because one thing that we all need to know is that compassion is vulnerable. When
mm,
we act compassionately as we want to, then we're in danger of being exploited by others who accept our gifts and do not reciprocate or downright exploit them. And unless you can solve that problem, then it's wisest to withhold your gifts. I mean, it's very,
Mm,
very simple. And so, although the first core design principle, to have a strong sense of identity and purpose that everyone agrees on, is the most important, the other design principles protect that so that it goes well. There's coordination, there's monitoring, there's correction for when we're not doing what we should. All of this stuff where you can think of as a little miniature social physiology for the group. And so it's at the same time deeply intuitive. You don't have to be a professor or an egghead or anything like that in order to understand these um, these principles, but it doesn't just automatically materialize. So when Jeff said we've lost our way, I think
mm,
it's true. We've intellectually lost our way. We're kind of wandering in a wilderness of false ideas. And
mm,
so when we see it the right way, then it's like a homecoming. And then it becomes very, very intuitive. And I think the last thing I want to say is that it really merges with spirituality because I think when we look at the spiritual impulse, what it is, it's really the joy of being part of something larger than yourself.
mm,
It's there where words like sacred and worship come in. What do those words mean? They don't need to be used in a religious context. When we say something is sacred, we mean it's so important to us that we place it above ourselves. We want to serve it, or we want to subordinate our narrow self-interest to it. And so I think that one thing that these groups do, and I think this is probably what the groups that you're assembling for the compassion games already feel, but can feel even more, is basically the joy of a spiritual impulse by being part of something larger than yourself in the best sense of the word. And so much of what we mean by religion and spirituality just is invoked,
mm.
regardless of whether you're a member of a formal religion or a New Age religion or don't regard yourself as spiritual at all. Then in all cases, when you enter this social environment, then typically this psychology, basically, this innate human psychology is just invoked.
Mm.
So I think that's what I think already your groups are experiencing, but they can experience it even more if they um, take this on. And we're so proud to be able to offer this now. In the past, we've offered it in the form of multi-week courses, but now we're offering it in the form of a 2-hour
Mm.
experience, which is interactive. It's not just lecture. And so I
Yeah.
think that we really hope that as many people as possible take this free offering, not just as individuals, but as groups. If you're part of a group doing
Right.
this, then please let all group members do it and then talk about it.
Yeah.
And then I
Yeah.
think you're on your way. And if you want some more assistance from us, that's fine. But for the most part, this will prove itself, I think, just on that basis.
I am so excited about this, guys. I mean, let me just say it back to you as I'm hearing it. We've got this time frame between now and September 27th when we're going to be playing for humanity. And we have the capacity, not only as individuals, but to form teams as well as teams of teams. And we have this resource called ProSocial Essentials. And part of the games that's so meaningful is we report on what's happening, what impact we're having. We make the compassion visible. We have a report, a compassion in action report, and we have this dashboard. And we collectively can get really good at cooperation during this time. Let's make this an open classroom. Let's make this an experiment in what we can do, having the genius and the wisdom of what you're offering here, David and Jeff, to us as teams and teams of teams. And let's keep that reflection, that make visible as core to the process. We're going to have compassion correspondence interfacing with folks and teams that are doing stuff. Let's include when we've learn things from ProSocial that have become essential. Like when you talk about identity and purpose for us here in One World, we've done that work. We've done the work with you guys of supporters. We know that we're here to unite humanity, restore Mother Earth, care for all life. And when we play the compassion games, we are creating a new way of winning, which is uplifting everybody, that we all win together. We can show what that means and discover it together in a way we never have before. We're more connected than we've never been, and having access to this course. So this is a call to play, to be pro-social, to because there is a new beginning here, David and Jeff. That's what we're saying. The old story of separation has come to an end. And to get back in the trail, one of the indigenous prophecies that I love sharing here is the Anishinaabe people when they came to that fork in the road, when one way looked beautiful and lush and green, and the other way was charred and dark. What that new people chose to do is to take neither path, but to turn back to remember what was lost along the trail. And what you're saying is cooperation is natural to us. We live in these small teams, but we've forgotten. We've been swept along into a different story. And you're inviting us to get reacquainted and remembering what we know instinctively is the right thing and to do what's good, beautiful, and true together.
This thing of story, John, I'm glad you brought it up because it's really important. One of the things that I've learned from David as part of his work in modern evolutionary science is something called dual inheritance theory. David, we'll see how I do with this. But basically, we have two streams of inheritance. We know that we have a genetic inheritance, biological inheritance through our genes. We have a genome. But we also have an inheritance that comes through culture, that comes through symbols and symbolism, a phenotype and a genotype. And this social and cultural stream is really important, and we do inherit it. We inherit it through education and imitation and enculturation, and it colors our lens of perception. It is literally how we see the world. Same with language. Language is how we see the world. We know that there are words in one language that do not have an equivalent in another language, which means that they don't exist. You can't even conceive of it. So the story that we're telling is really important. And this inheritance that we're receiving through culture and through social interaction that is largely the stories we tell. And just like in the genotype, that we can inherit genes that are corrupt and genes that make us ill, we can inherit symbols and stories that are corrupt and make us ill. So if we're telling stories that are incomplete or incorrect, guess what? That's what we're carrying in the future. So it's so important about the stories that we tell. And the new story is really the old story. Interestingly enough, it's remembering who we really are. And this is also where the indigenous and the ancients are so critically important. Because one of the things that they've done largely is, they passed the torch and handed that story of interconnection down from generation to generation. That story of our interdependence with nature, being part of nature, not apart from nature. So we have to remember and kind of restore the original stories that we tell, but we also can create new stories that also correct the old story because there's new possibilities. But we have to be very, very intentional about these stories because we realize when we look at a lot of the stories that we've been told and that are being handed down, they're not the right stories. And they're often not even real, accurate stories. So it's critically important. And the possibility is is that we have both the opportunity and really the responsibility to recreate this story for ourselves and for those that come after us, because it is an inheritance stream.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
if
the
I could,
games. Yeah. Go ahead,
could I
Dave.
add, could I
Please.
add to that just a little bit?
Please.
Because
Please.
I
Please.
always very frequently mention something wise that Jeff said a long time ago to me, which is that we need four things like the sturdy legs of a chair or a table: science, art, spirituality, and technology. This is what we need to basically braid together in order to have really strong belief systems. And I think um, art is stories plus more. So, I mean, art, what is art? Music, dance, pageantry, ritual, and stories. And so I think that whole dimension um, is so vibrant. And so one of the things this does is give a very central place. It's not just science-y, it's science-y entwined with artsy. And and of course, spirituality we've talked about, and then technology is required in order for this to take place at a worldwide
Hmm.
scale, because otherwise it's going to be restricted. And I think one of the things we need to know is that most of the problems of the world are not due to individual selfishness, but lower level cooperation, basically groups that are cooperating in conflict with other groups. And so cooperation is both a problem and a solution. For it to be a solution, it has to be worldwide cooperation, and everything less than that has to be coordinated. Everything from our small groups to all of our social identities and our institutions and so on. So it's a it's a huge job. So in any case, and this means that, for example, artificial intelligence is not something to be feared. It's something to be more or less guided and stewarded and is needed, basically. But of course, it needs to be the right kind. And currently, it's heading in um, very different, directions. So let there be science, art, spirituality, and technology all in a beautiful brain.
Well,
And so that's what we need to be working on.
yeah. You know, you guys probably didn't see it, but I want to make you aware of it. On Monday, we had a session with Linnea Lombard and
Hmm.
great transition stories. Okay. It was awesome because she got to share the fact that we live in this multiplicity of all these different narratives and stories and how we find our way there, and your work being one of those stories and narratives. And what I've seen here is that there's often conflicting interpretations. So many of the problems really come down to that, and that it's not about who's right and wrong, and the respect that there are the multiplicity of these different views and how we enter into this conversation. And here the compassion games gives us this field of play, and pro-social is giving us these practices and principles for becoming better players together. So the invitation, as I see, is not just to care more, but to cooperate more skillfully, to actually learn how teams and teams of teams and communities and bioregions can work together for the good of all life. And imagine we didn't have countries competing, but we had bioregions cooperating. We could do that. We could show in these next 90 plus days what that could look like, what the world could look like if we
Uh,
actually can get our act together and learn how to play together.
John, could I briefly recount two stories as a kind of an illustration?
Yeah,
I can do it
please,
very
please,
quickly. I
please,
think one
please.
story is the story of World Unity Week, which is uh, I am first and foremost a human being and citizen of the world. My highest good, basically, is the welfare of the whole earth, including all other life forms, not just the human life form. And I think that everyone here, by virtue of the fact that they identify with World Unity Week, that is their ethos, that is their story, that is their master CDP1, you might say, core design, a strong sense of identity and purpose. And then everything fits under that. So obviously we work in many different settings, small groups, large groups, we have all these different identities. And what the master identity tells us is that everything we do at these smaller levels, these lower levels, has to be coordinated with the global common good in mind. So that's story number one. Story number two is the metaphor of the invisible hand, which says that actually we don't need to do that. All we need to do is operate according to our own self-interest, look out for ourselves, and then we will be led as if by an invisible hand to benefit the common good. That's story number two.
Mm.
And now you can ask yourself the question, when we act upon these two different stories, what happens? And I think what happens is when we act upon story number two, it turns out that the invisible hand is not true. It's profoundly untrue, actually. And so this leads to all kinds of harmful behaviors. We might have been good people. We were good people misled by a bad story.
Mm.
But if we're guided by story number one, then that's the better path. And so I think this is an example of how stories make a difference and how if you have the wrong story, then
Right.
you might be a
Right.
good person. And I think the world is full of good people who are under the spell of a bad story. And so we need to change the story. And if we do that, then the good people, I think, will start behaving in ways that actually lead to the goal of world unity.
Mm. Beautiful, David. Uh, part of that shift to that new story, I don't know if you guys have had this experience. You mentioned AI, and I've written this paper, AI doesn't care. We do, right? But I have had the experience recently a few times of reading back what I got back from ChatGPT or Claude, and they say, "Oh, that's totally wrong. That's totally wrong." And then realize, "Oh, no, wait a minute. I never thought about it that way before. Actually, I was wrong." I realize that in this new world where we can embrace this new story, that's going to have to become easier and easier for us to concede and recognize. I mean, I'd love to ask you both what would become possible if teams really learned how to cooperate on purpose? I mean, if we really let go of old patterns that we know have led us into this insane situation, what would the world look like? What would become possible for us?
David?
Jeff, I pass to you.
This is
That's that's
uncharted
that's such
waters,
that's
right?
such that's such an easy question. I'm going to have Jeff answer it.
Yeah, right.
Uh,
Well, I'm going to answer it in something that I learned from you, is that what is possible is that individuals working in groups and groups working together and organizations working with them can begin to look not like an organization, but more like an organism, something that exists in nature. And if we can begin to do that in a highly intentional, conscious, and compassionate way, and then begin to intertwine these organisms of human interaction, then it can look like a superorganism.
mm,
And the possibility, and this is grounded in science as a possibility, is for humanity to consciously evolve and compassionately evolve into a superorganism. And
mm,
how wonderful would that be? Now, it has to start at the local level, just as you said. You can't start at the top without the bottom.
right,
But if it
right.
can start at the local level and then begin to interconnect together, almost like a nervous system does,
Mm,
it really begins to look like what Teilhard de Chardin um, uh, envisioned is the noosphere of
yeah.
possibility. So that's how I would answer it. What do you
Mm,
do?
Yeah, well, let me thank you, Jeff. And I'll say two things adding upon that. It's falling in love with two things that often we're we're quite ambivalent about. One is falling in love with structure. And
mm,
often, we love to be inspired. We love to go to those conferences which is a peak experience. But then when it gets down to actually working in groups, then that seems to be hard work and drudgery and not something to fall in love with. But structure is so important. We can't live without it. And I think the idea of our community as an organism, and Thich Nhat Hanh is someone who said that about his Plum Village. It's not an organization, it's an organism. And
Mm,
and so on the one hand, you go to Plum Village as Jeff and I have, and I'll bet a bunch of people in this audience have, wow, how inspiring is it to spend some time in Plum Village? But if you knew the structure that makes Plum Village work, and what the nuns and the monks of Plum Village actually do in order to make that an organism, then that's just mind-boggling when you look at it. So I think that groups require structure. That's what the core design principle is all about, and we should love that structure. That structure is what is like our anatomy and physiology. Don't take that away from
mm,
us. And maintaining that structure is like the body maintaining our our structure. So a whole new attitude towards structure, and also a whole new attitude towards experimentation, which involves a new attitude towards failure. Because at the end of the day, we don't know what's going to work. All we can do is make our best and most informed, enlightened, and pro-social guess, and then we have to see what happens, and we have to be in a position to revise that again and again and again. So to be experimental requires, I think, a very interesting combination of humility and hubris. Kind of
mm,
interesting because on the one
mm.
hand, some things are more appropriate than other things. When we winnow those out, we figure out what's working. We better guard that. I mean, that's precious knowledge. I mean, you just don't throw that away. So if we've established that something works, don't don't mess
Right,
with that.
right.
But on the other hand, that's always a work in progress. And so we don't know and we do. And so to fall in love with structure and experimentation, which is just evolution, another word for conscious evolution, I think is what takes the compassionate impulse, the desire to do well, and turns it into the actual capacity
Mm,
to to do well. And it's like a moonshot to actually do this for our small groups, for our larger groups, for our institutions, all the way up to the world. Man, that's going to be really complicated. It's going to take all of our expertise. It'll be like a moonshot, but we did
mm.
put a person on the moon. And so we can do it.
Yes, 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 David. Yes, Jeff. Listen, so here's our opportunity, right? We've got a playing field. Each of us taking that course and talking about how we becoming more effective at cooperation. What impact is that having? We can learn as a community here. This is the space for that kind of experimentation. And I mentioned the city of Louisville. They were such a key part to the birth of the Compassion Games. And I've shared this quote a couple of times the last days, which is just so meaningful. I think you'll get why I think it's so relevant to share right now. One of my heroes is Muhammad Ali, and he is and is known as a champion of compassion. The way he lived his life in the Ali Center. But here's what he said. I don't know if you've heard this quote. He said, impossible is just a big word thrown around by small men who find it easier to live in the world they've been given than to explore the power they have to change it.
Wow.
Impossible is not a fact, it's an opinion. Impossible is potential. Impossible is temporary. Impossible is nothing.
Wow.
Okay? Is that not the perfect message for what we could do here together? We are in a new beginning, and the limits of the possible have totally been transformed. And we don't know. We need that humility that you're talking about, David, as well as that hubris, that spirit of the greatest. We could be the greatest we've ever been in this next 90 days. Try it out. I am so grateful to you guys and for Pro Social World being able to bring this kind of resource to the teams and people playing the games.
In the spirit of trying it out, what I'm
Yes.
putting into the chat is a link to the landing page, the site for ProSocial Essentials, which I'll share on my screen, and then a code specifically for you and for your teams so that you can enroll at 100% discount, so you can do it for free. So 2 hours, self-paced, and it will lay the foundation of these 3 frameworks, but also provide not just information, but practices, tools, things that you can put on, because ProSocial is not a prescription for cooperation. It's a framework for cooperation. And what that means is that each group, each community has to put it on. And they're going to do it in their own unique way. And that's why context is important. It has to be in their context, in their language of what's important to them. And then they need to decide, what is fair and what agreements they need to have. And then how do you ensure that those agreements are kept? And how do you reward those that are doing more or, doing less, those sorts of things. So the key point is, here's the framework. We're offering it as a gift. If you put it on, we know that it works because it is evidence-based, and you begin working with it, the group, the organization, the team, by putting it on and making it their own, the center of gravity is at the center of that team, at the center of that group. It's not coming from the outside in. We're providing the tools, but you have to put it on in your own unique way. But when you do that, you both have the capacity, but also the responsibility, because it's yours. And then the group can begin to work like an organism. So there's the link to the ProSocial Essentials page. If you put the code in at the bottom, you can go ahead and enter, and it'll be for free. And we want to offer this to the Compassion Games to help you be more compassionate.
Thank you, guys. Thank you, guys. And we want to give you back the feedback. It's all part of the games, right? We want you to benefit from our experiences in doing this. So what we're thinking we're going to do is really do like a campaign. We're going to put an article, and we'll probably take the link to this video or clips from it this time together, because it's been great to give people the ability to come into this conversation. And we should probably meet a few more times during the 90 days. I mean, I'm not asking you guys to do this. Maybe you can, but I'm committed to bringing people together who've gone through the course. So the idea here is you can do it as an individual, yes. But if you are organizing a team, get everyone on your team to do it, right? We want teams of teams as well that says, okay, and be able to promote the resource as a way of playing this experimentation. And what would it be like if we all got better at cooperating?
Yeah, and it's a very good idea to come back together with touch points, because as I was mentioned, each group, each team, they're going to interpret it and apply it in their own unique way. And so what can happen is, if we begin to share with each other what's working, what's not working, you can get kind of this cross-fertilization of collective wisdom, where the possibility is vicarious group cooperation, group learning, not just at an individual level, but at a group level. And then you can move it faster. You get the flywheel start turning by learning from others, so that everybody doesn't
This is, by the way, the cultural this is the cultural equivalent of genetic recombination. Why do we have sex? It's because we're mixing our genes, and so the genes that are working well and many different combinations can come together. And so when we have experiences as groups and then we come together and we communicate them, we're able to basically compare and mix and recombine our best practices. So coming together, just think of it as like cultural sex, if that helps you out there.
Wow. A cooperation orgy in the compassion games. I love this. This is fabulous. Thank you, David. I never thought we'd get to this. Now we're talking what really matters to us, okay? Well, I love this. Oh my gosh. So what, Jeff, thank you, David, thank you for making this resource available. Let's make sure that everybody gets it. In other words, they understand how they can take the course. There's feedback within the course. I did it, the course is great. And there's also sharing on the reports that we're putting up on the dashboard so people can actually see. And I'd like to encourage people to include in their reports what impact taking the course had on them and on the teams that they're a part of, because we want to give as much feedback as we can to Pro-Social World in the process.
One of the other things is that embedded at the end of the course, there's a link to kind of a survey tool that can provide some feedback and scoring along the core design principles. So it's embedded into that. One of the things that the pro-social world does and is we provide research, and we're a research institute. So we can provide research on behalf of others. And so we've embedded a touch of that research into that pro-social essentials tool.
Fabulous,
Right.
fabulous.
Right.
Great. So here, let me show you guys on our site as well. We'll put that article up in One World. One World is the playing field for the games. But here is where on the Compassion Games website, people can share the impact that they're having. If you go to this page here on the report, there's a story about how we make compassion visible here, what those reports are, and people complete these compassion and action reports. And it really brings the games to life, because then you'll see on the top there, and you can submit multiple reports. There's this now a dashboard that's been revealed here. That's going to be able to see compassion in action. There's again another video introducing it, but here's the actual dashboard itself. And if you click on this, it opens in its own window. We can start to see the stories that are already appearing of what people are doing to bring compassion into the world. This is in addition to what you'll be able to do with the pro-social course about keeping us in the loop here. And in One World, we'll put this article, we'll put a link to the code, and game on. I mean, there's different ways to play. This way, playing together has a lot to do with learning how to be pro-social. And I've seen it. I've seen again how challenging it is for folks to work together. And the idea here is we're playing together for a shared impact, asking each of these teams to say, all right, what do we want to make real by September 27th? And part of making that real by September 27th is learning how to be more effective in cooperation. So thank you guys. Really grateful for this partnership. It means a lot. All right. What else? So let's bring this to a close in a good way.
I wonder if some of the
So
participants have some things to say.
yeah. Let's open up the room there. We've got Shonda and we've got Ingrid here looking to see if people want to offer any questions or comments where we've got a few more minutes. We're welcome to do that. I mean, isn't this great? I mean, I am so excited.
Go ahead and wave at the video camera and we'll bring you up.
In survival of the kindest.
Joan was Sun Hub. Go ahead, sister.
Oh, great. Oh, fabulous, Joan.
Well, wow. This finally brings us to this compassion game. So we've been thinking about how can we play, and thanks Jeff and Dave and David bring the means to this play field. This technology, you're talking about the four streams. science, art, spirituality, technology coming together. We have already connected with groups who are in the technology science field. They are talking about how can we collaborate. There's also evolving, emerging new area of technology. They are talking about quantum computing, Q-Day sometimes coming in 2029, and how this quantum safe cryptography to be put in place before that time. But all the things are kind of, like really just how can people work together, cooperate, bring things, you know, in a unified way. But without spiritual art, this part, it is very difficult to to come to the source, to get the rooted and from the profound interconnectedness Jeff you just mentioned. So
Mm.
now we have this means, and we'd love to play this together, and how this game going to put it together um, by one world, and there will be, because the researchers, of course, would love to have this, like reflection reports coming back. How are we going to, like this is very subtle. It's a subtlety, it's attunement. And how are we going to build this capacity, strengthen this capacity through this compassion game that
Mm.
we're going to play during this 99 days, just experimentation. As David was saying, it is a structure. Has to be an anchor, the core, to the roots, and there's a flow we call mountain, sea, mountain, ocean type of, like what a model framework we say. It
Yeah,
has
yeah.
a structure and the flow to
Mm.
go along with it. So thank you for this beautiful gift that you are giving this whole community, the team, and we are going to play, have
Yeah.
fun and joy, joy, joy. Thank you.
Yes, exactly, Joan. You get it. You get it. And it's strategy and structure, right? We need both. So tactically, there's a question, Jeff, you should answer in the chat. Someone, Juliet, tried. Summer signed up for the course. So the process, do people have to put in their credit card, or where is that moment when they put
I
in the
hope not.
code?
I hope not. We have to fix it so that that's not necessary, since we are offering it for free.
Well, it is for free.
Yep.
You may, I'm not sure. If you do, it'll be zero charge. But
Okay.
if you use the code, it'll net out to zero.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. All
Okay.
right. It's good to know. The code worked great. So that's what Summer's reporting in the chat there.
Yeah.
Okay. And you know what's important to distinguish? That's why survival of the kindest, it's a culture hack. That's why a co-opetition. So to play these games, this is not a finite win-lose game. This is an infinite game. And that's been defined, I thought, in a great way, where in finite games, you're playing within the boundaries. Here, we're playing with the boundaries. And the point of the game is to keep playing. So you cannot lose the compassion games, right? Now, we are reporting, not reporting to see winners and losers, right? But to see how we're all leading each other and winning together. So, yes, Joan, it is a game, but not the typical kind of win-lose game. And it's a game in which, for us, what you can see from this conversation, we want to see, can we get better at cooperating with each other? Can we get
John, at
better?
the,
Yeah.
John, at the same time, I have to observe that when you recount the history of the compassion games and when you're interacting with Greg Fisher at Louisville, There was a sports spirit of sports.
Yes,
It's like,
it's totally
game
true.
on, we're the best. No, we're the best. We're the best. And so I think that there's something about those competitive juices that
Yes,
that's also baked into us, and we could indulge in that. We don't have to just say, we're all winners. We can say, I'm the best at whatever.
yes,
And to tap into that deep well of of competition in the good sense of the word, because everything that changes is a form of competition. Something replaced something else. So this is not competition or cooperation. You appreciate that.
yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
I
You're
think that we
absolutely right.
can. I'm so struck when you look at, for example, New York City most recently with the New York Knicks, and then Seattle with the Seattle Seahawks, and how that caused the cities to come together, and
Yes,
that
yes,
feeling of
yes,
oneness that
yes.
came from this competition is something that it really bears reflection.
Hmm.
That this is competition in a good sense. The Olympics, of course, are like that. The World Cup is like that. There's something strong about this that we
Yeah,
should
yeah,
we should not be shy about
yes.
tapping into.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. There's no denying it and I told you, I think we researched that word competition, that the root of that is competere, which means to strive together. So the idea that we're competing, really, in the end, we're really competing with ourselves, right? To be the very best we could be. But how that comparison to others can motivate us. And I jokingly said, if we switched from countries competing to bioregions, and the way we applied the co-opetition to it is who's the most compassionate bioregion. And what was so funny is right away, Summer and I had just been in Hawaii and realize culturally, my God, they're the fiercest when it comes to compassion. They've got that aloha thing everybody says to each other, the mahalo, the shaka, which is their way of signaling to each other their care for community and each other, that the Sailor Sea was going to have to rise up in response. And when I would tell people that, it had the same effect. Yeah, we could do it. So I totally agree with you, David. And it is an edge because some people are totally turned off at the thought of losing in some way, right? There's something about the game that threatens this. Oh my God, am I going to be seen as someone who lost? But you cannot lose the compassion games. So, and we can harness our competitive juices to do more good. And in fact, we're talking about bringing to the global citizen stage in Central Park the champions of compassion who really do extraordinary things during the compassion games. So
We've got some
maybe
more
one
raised
of them.
hands here, John. Could we?
Please. Yeah, 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 absolutely. Juliet, okay, that says working. Who's got raised hands there? There we go. Hello, Kevin.
Hello there. I just have a quick question, and it seems to me, and I may have missed it, but it seems to me that based on what I've heard so far, it's kind of like a four pillars, and arts being one, digital being another one, please help me fill in the other two. I may have
Science and spirituality.
Okay, so science and spirituality. Thank you, David. So I wonder with digital, I wonder if there's a way that we could have an aggregator, an ideological aggregator, where everyone can input their ideas at the four different levels that I heard much earlier, where there's local, which is small, medium, large, and then global. So if I were to say within my municipal community, we have an ideological aggregator where people can put their ideas into an AI assisted aggregator that when people input their ideas, the AI assistant is using an active listening technique so that when people are inputting their ideas, that it's ensuring that it's hearing their ideas correctly. And then at that point, it goes into a bucket, if you will, of everyone that is inputting their ideas into, let's say, a municipal concept, so that we can essentially take the cult of personality out of political leadership, because the aggregator creates the singular campaign platform that all of the politicians are speaking to the same demands of the community, and it's only how they're going to achieve those demands.
I think we lost Kevin there. At least he froze. I'm not hearing him.
Let's see if he comes back. What he said so far is great. So I think that this is just the kind of, I mean, without commenting on the specifics, I think that this is awesome. So just perfect example of how technology can contribute to this.
Yep. Yep.
And also a perfect example of how technology can be a pain in the butt, because I just froze in mid-statement.
Right. Right. The technology works when it's invisible, when it's transparent, like your shoes.
Yeah. Let's
And
go
Okay.
for it. Go for it experimentally.
and
I don't know if it'll work or not. This is back to experimentation. Great idea. Let's try it in a way that's safe and see if it works, and then
Well,
modify it. Let's see.
And Kevin, we've been doing that. The Playing Together for Shared Impact summarizes using AI people's different answers to questions. And it's remarkable how quickly it moves to consensus, to bring into coherence, to make it more effective for cooperation. So it's great. If you want to try that out inside the games, I'm here to help you.
So
I love it.
essentially, if I can just wrap up quickly, the idea was spawned from the concept of pre-colonial governance and the structures of pre-colonial indigenous governance structures in Turtle Island, and how do we take that philosophy of consensus and make it scalable to 40 million people in Canada or 400 million people in the United States, and to teach AI at its infancy the things that we stand to lose, which is the oral histories of pre-colonial governance and the empathy within that consensus model. And I think it kind of partners very well with what I've heard so far today, because it is taking bioregional concepts. It's taking that empathetic leadership and the digital components together. So thank you very much for allowing me a moment to speak. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank
Keep
you.
going. All right. I see in the chat we're still having some challenges. We're going to work them through and get it so that it works for everybody there. So I think we've come also to that moment in the conversation when we're going to close here. But I want to give you guys both a chance to say anything else in closing you want to share.
Oh, appreciation and gratitude, basically. This is such a great opportunity. And it'd be just lovely to see this spring to life. I'll end with this idea of catalysis, that in chemistry, you can have a substance that you can sprinkle in small amounts into a chemical broth and cause chemical reactions to take place much faster than they did before. And the idea of cultural catalysis, that we could actually, there's something we could do akin to sprinkling a little substance into the cultural broth that could cause positive change to happen in months and years rather than decades and not at all. And I think that in a very real sense, cultural catalysis is a possibility and actually is quite like chemical catalysis when you look at how both work. So I would love to think of that what's happening here is or can be an example of cultural catalysis, and that we can do in 100 days what otherwise might require decades or not take place at all. And to keep that in mind as an authentic possibility.
Wow, David. Game on. Yes. Jeff.
Well, we're in a critical time, and the Compassion Games is an offering. And ProSocial World is also offering something to it. These two things can only come together with you. So put it on, take up the invitation, play the game, and it's the water that lifts all the boats. Thank you.
Yeah. There's a new way to win here. So our care becomes a practice. Our practice becomes cooperation. Cooperation becomes a shared impact. We can do this. Thank you, everybody, for participating. The games are on. Now is the time. If not us, who? And if not now, when? Game on.
All right, everyone.
Thank you.
Right.